Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of
the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everybody to episode 35 of Garden of Doom. I am Jeff, and it is April 4th. So happy holidays to everyone who's celebrating a holiday. Today is Easter Sunday, so a special happy Easter for those who celebrate, and happy Passover for those who celebrate that holiday as well. Let me give you a couple housekeeping items. One, this was supposed to be episode 36. I did record an interview with somebody. I'm not going to say their name, because I'm not about naming names here or anything like that if it's not a good thing, but I did not feel that the interview was either informative, educational, or entertaining. I have done shows before where I haven't felt they've been all three of those things. That's the goal, obviously, but almost every show I've done, if not every show I've done, I thought hit at least one of those. At least, maybe it was more educational than entertaining, or educational and informative, which are sort of similar. I sort of divide education between something that is objectively useful information and informative that something might be, more fun information, fun at a cocktail party, or just something that is, interesting, like from a hobbyist perspective. Whatever, doesn't matter. In any case, the interview I did earlier this week, I didn't think was any of those things, and I didn't want to put it out. I've done that once before, and I felt bad about it, and I shouldn't have put that show out. And I'm not harboring any illusions here. I know this is not 60 Minutes. I know this is not the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know I'm not Quentin Tarantino, and that everything I'm putting out there is being scrutinized by millions upon millions of people, etc., etc. But this is my name and it's my product, and there's a certain standard I want, and there's a certain level of quality that I want to be associated with my product. And I accept my technical issues and my technical problems, but I don't want to put a show that, even if the audience can turn up the volume or put up with the difference in sound levels between myself and the guest, or whatever the case may be, that they're still going to at least feel that they spent their hour or 2 hours well. And again, I've put out one show where I didn't really think that it hit any of my boxes, and I wasn't about to do that a second time. So all of you listening realize I'm apologizing about something that you didn't have to ingest, but just know where I'm coming from. This is building to what, you ask? Well, today's show is a solo show, and I don't love doing solo shows. I've done, I think, 2 or 3 in the past, and I'm not saying that they were bad, but I don't love doing it. I'm not that comfortable talking to nobody. I'm getting closer to that point. I know lots of podcasters do this routinely. That's sort of their jam. It's not mine. I like working with a person or people. I find that's more interesting for conversation, and I like to hear more than one voice, and that's just me. So one solo show I did was catching up on news items, which had buried up, and at that point that was piled up is a better word. At that point, covering news was really essential part of the show. It sort of drifted by. It's always on the back burner, but I sort of use the Facebook page for that. So if you're someone who comes to Garden of News to get sort of that alternative news that you don't find somewhere else, and we don't mean alternative news like a prior administration not to be spoken of here, but things about science that you don't necessarily hear on CNN or Fox or wherever, or biology or anthropology, archaeology, some of the more extreme weather event news, just sort of the stuff that you want to know about but really can't get in one place easily enough. I try to curate that for you and put that on the Garden of Doom Facebook page, so please follow that if you like that part of the show. The other solo show I did, I tried to do like sort of pop culture reviews interspersed with the stories of voodoo, and I thought that was an interesting show, but I don't know, I don't think it was the greatest product I put out. Anyway, so we're doing another solo show today, so with some hesitancy and some apology, I put out this solo show. I do want to let you know that I'm talking with 2 other speakers from the NACON conference, and they both seem to be very interested and very interesting, but I'm gonna set those dates up, and I may have 2 surprise shows this week. I'm not sure, but there might be 3 shows dropping this week, because next week we go back to Land of the Lost with our expert panel. So, and listen, I know you were hearing before, educational. Is Land of the Lost educational? No. Is it entertaining? I sure as hell hope so. I think it's entertaining. I think it's a whole lot of fun, and I think it's informative in its own way. And listen, maybe it's educational in its own way too, because we go pretty deep, but we have fun. Anyway, that is to say, the Garden of Doom is not always serious, despite the name. We can be frivolous as well. But today's show is going to be based on a couple things, and they are 2 books. So I'm going to call this the book report episode. And I read 2 books recently from 2 well-thought-of authors on very different sides of equations. So I may have mentioned to you in the past Dr. Avi Loeb, who's the physicist, astrophysicist from Harvard, the head of one of their departments, and wrote a book called Extraterrestrial. And it's out now, and I read it. I also read, finally, Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods. So Extraterrestrial is a 2020 publication, brand new, still hardcover. Chariots of the Gods is from the 1960s, but sort of the famous father of the ancient aliens theory, at least the modern one. So a lot of things that we've talked about on this show before, we've made reference to von Daniken. I followed a lot of his work, but through other people. I never actually read the book until earlier last year. So I'm going to start with a quote from Ezekiel 12:12. I don't normally get directly biblical here, I think. And most of the quotes I give are the proverbs I've made up. This is actually from the scripture itself. So it goes like this. Son of man, thou dwellest in the midst of a rebellious house, which have eyes to see and see not. They have ears to hear and hear not. So, what does that mean here? I guess it's sort of saying that sometimes things are in plain sight, but we choose not to see them and we choose not to hear them. And that is sort of what Well, sort of what both of these authors are saying. So, Dr. Loeb is Harvard's top astronomer. He lays out a controversial theory that our solar system was recently visited by an advanced alien technology from a distant solar system. This is well documented. I think it was first found in 2017. I know it was first found in 2017, or at least that's the reports. Who knows what the truth is. Ironically, it was first spotted by an observatory in Hawaii, and the observatory is named Oumawuma, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. Again, ironically, this is why it's ironic, because they named the object after the observatory's location, and that's the Hawaiian word for scout. So that's the irony, because Dr. Loeb's theory is that this is a visitation of alien technology. Now, bear with me, because he's not saying that the technology is necessarily a live visit or even an intentional one. He's just saying there was alien technology. In fact, he thinks that the most likely explanation is that it's an artifact, is that it's from a destroyed vehicle, or it is a vehicle that's no longer functioning. But nevertheless, it's evidence of alien technology. So let's go back to late 2017, where this story begins as far as the public record is concerned. Scientists at a Hawaiian observatory glimpsed an object soaring through our inner solar system. It was moving so quickly that it could only have come from another star. So, interstellar. That's what interstellar means. More than one star system. Nothing more than that. Avi Loeb, Harvard's top astronomer, showed that it was not an asteroid, based on data, and we'll get into that in a little bit. He showed it was not an asteroid. He showed it was moving too fast, and it was along what's called as a strange orbit, again, not in an ellipse or a circle or any other orbit that any other bodies that we have, meaning astronomers writ large, have discovered or tracked. Going back to, as far as we know, the Mayans and the Egyptians and the Persians and everyone else that was doing astronomy long before our current ages have. It also left no trail of gas or debris in its wake, which is important, and we'll get to that in a couple minutes, and that there was only one conceivable explanation. The object was a piece of advanced technology. He surmises that this is the first interstellar visitor to be spotted in our solar system, and he outlined this theory and its implications for science, for religion, and for the future of our species in our planet. Yes, I'm reading some of that from the excerpts of the book itself, because I'm not going to go into all of the implications for science, religion, and the future of our species on our planet. I'll let Dr. Loeb speak for himself on that. But I do want to read a little bit about, and this is from his formal bio, so that you know that this guy is not a joke. He's not, this is not fringe science. He is the Frank B. Baird, B-A-I-R-D, Jr., professor of science at Harvard University. He's the chair of Harvard's Department of Astronomy. He's the founding director of Harvard's Black Hole Initiative and director of the Institute for Theory and Computation within the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. So, obviously very credentialed. He also chairs the advisory committee for the Breakthrough Starshot Initiative and serves as the science theory director for all initiatives of the Breakthrough Prize Foundation. He's also the chair of the Board on Physics and Astronomy of the National Academies. So again, more objective credentials there. He's the author of 4 books and over 700 scientific papers. He's an elected fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the American Physical Society, and the International Academy of Astronautics. In 2012, Time selected Loeb as one of the 25 most influential people in the space field. This object was observed for 8 months. It had no cometary tail. It was 8 times wider than it was long, and there was no natural sail, but there was a solar sail. The movement was different from any star or any other celestial body that's been observed. It was moving at a certain rate, but the rate changed. Now, that is not completely abnormal, although maybe it sounds like it does. Trajectory does react to the gravity of the sun or any large object. Obviously, the sun is the center of our solar system, so that's what most objects react to from gravity. So again, that's normal. But then it pushed away from the sun, which is abnormal given these circumstances. Why is it normal? A lot of times comets will accelerate from the sun because they get sort of like a thrust push by debris melting off it. So that's why the lack of a tail is important. The tail is the telltale sign. So we've got T-A-I-L and T-A-L-E, telltale sign that it's a comet, or at least a natural object, because the ice melts off of it and those gases act sort of as a thrust. So the lack of a tail told us it was not a comet or something that had a lot of ice and other meltables on it that were impacted by the heat of the sun, thus changing the trajectory and the speed rate. It also had sort of a cigar shape to it. It was long, but the famous image of Oumawuma was really an artist's rendering, and I think we've all sort of accepted that cigar as true, almost like that old Star Trek episode from the original series where they had that cigar thing that was almost like a black hole. I don't remember the end of it, but hopefully people who are sort of my age or Star Trek fans know what I speak of. Anyway, Loeb believes that the object actually was more flat than cigar-shaped. Not cigar, I don't know what a cigar is, but cigar-shaped, so more flat. Again, it was, I think, 8 times wider than it was, longer than it was deep. There was no infrared radiation that detected off of it. The lack of the radiation detection meant that the size was about 200 meters. 200 meters is like 2 football fields. No, it's more than 2 football fields, because we go by yards, and meters are a little bit bigger than yards. So, let's just call it 2 1/3 football fields long. The reflection level was at the high end of reflection from other space objects. Now, obviously, since it's got a reflection level comparable to other space objects, it doesn't make it particularly unusual, but it was at the high end. And the high end of something that long is unusual when it's that flat. So again, think of like a long rectangle in space. So a large reflective surface, and that's measured by the infrared radiation. So they can detect it. It's different than with circular objects or longer asteroids, or anyway, anything else that we know that's floating out there, not really floating, orbiting out there, have different infrared signatures, and those signatures give us clues as to the shape, or can actually help us measure the shapes with some specificity. The push meant a larger area for its weight, thus it had to be wide and thin. It was an unnatural shape. They thought it was a possible light sail, maybe pancake shape, but there was no sail that appeared. Nature doesn't make things this thin. It would have to be a sliver. If it was a hydrogen iceberg, which was one of the theories, it would have evaporated shortly. It did not evaporate. In fact, it changed trajectories and left our solar system. It's gone. It's outside of what we call there's the inner belt, and then there's the Kuiper belt, and then there's the Oort cloud. So it's at least in the Oort cloud, if not past that. It was moving at about 58,600 miles per hour before it left the outer belt, the Kuiper belt. There's also a dust cloud theory saying there was a dust cloud. Dust clouds are not dense enough, and they are not likely to survive that close to the sun. So while that can't be ruled out entirely, Dr. Loeb theorized or opines that it's almost certainly not that. Other theories were that it was a piece of a bigger object. Dr. Loeb says no such shapes have been seen like this before, and again, it was an unnatural shape, and for something to have been sliced off like that, it's more likely to have been sliced off a large piece of artificial technology than off, say, a planet or a moon or a comet. So, he did not say this. I'm saying it. I'm rewatching Battlestar Galactica on Peacock, which I endorse. I remember loving it. I'm still enjoying it. I see more loopholes now than I did the first time around, but that's natural when you see something more than once. But it's still a fun show. Anyway, picture taking a giant laser torch and slicing off the top of the Battlestar Galactica, sort of lengthwise. It's sort of that kind of shape, and there's no natural shapes like that, again, traveling in space, that have been observed now or ever. Okay, comets change speed in a predictable fashion. They have a corresponding loss of mass. That corresponding loss of mass is typically 10%. That also causes a change in the rate of the spin, typically, to match the corresponding loss of the mass, and again, also the tail from the evaporation, which causes the thrust. Oumawuma didn't have any of those things. Its rate of spin did not change. There was no loss of mass, and there was no change in the spin rate. And of course, there was the no outgassing, which we talked about before. Now, Dr. Loeb says it's easy to test these theories by positioning cameras in that direction. What does he mean by that direction? The direction from which Oumawuma first entered our solar system from the solar system, or from interstellar. He believes that this is likely one of many, and that this might be like a bottle that you find from the ocean in the sand with a note in it, that it was a message, maybe not an intentional message, but that we should take it as a message and we should look for more. And the most likely place to look for more is where we found the first bottle. Because if somebody is sending messages, or a ship got cleaved, or technology got altered or destroyed, and part of it was floating this way or traveling this way, it's likely that more of it is floating that way from more or less the same area. And so if we position cameras in slight degrees, we'll cover a lot of literal space and the field, and computers can see a whole lot wider than the natural eye, obviously. He firmly agrees that there's a lot of nonsense around UFOs and extraterrestrials, and he doesn't subscribe to that kind of madness. But he also rejects that there's no science around the study of alien technology or unidentified flying objects. He says all science has junk science, and all science has wrong turns. I mean, we're sort of living through that now with the pandemic. We had theories that started. We have theories that were correct. We have theories that were incorrect. In the beginning, we were all worried about surfaces, and everybody was worried about our Amazon packages or UPS packages giving us COVID. And people were desanitizing surfaces and wiping down doorknobs and things like that. And as it turned out that, the disease generally could live for about a second on a surface. And that was sort of junk science, and it was temporary. And so, again, there's junk science all around us, and there's science that's proven wrong, and there's science that's proven right. It's a lot of trial and error. He hypothesized that Oumawuma was not operational. Its age is unknown. It's since left the range of any pragmatic operation. Basically means we can't see it anymore, or we can barely see it anymore. So we can't take any measurements or anything of that nature that would make it a useful subject. Now, there's a new theory, and it was actually replayed today, not today, but, I listened today, but on Sci-Fi, which is, I think, part of the NPR network, but it's a long-standing science podcast. Ira Flato's the host. Even on Big Bang Theory, Sheldon, I think it was Sheldon, was once a guest on Science Friday. Actually, it might have been Sheldon and Leonard. Doesn't matter. Anyway, just to point out that it's a pretty mainstream podcast. So I believe the professors who put this out were from Northwest Arizona University, and they believe it's part of a destroyed planet. And that's the theory that conventional science is accepting. So I want you, the audience, to know that is what conventional science thinks, that's part of a destroyed planet. Okay? Dr. Loeb was aware of this. He rejects it. He's in the minority. Doesn't mean he's right. Doesn't mean he's wrong. Certainly doesn't mean he's right just because I'm covering his theory and his book on the show. I am not an astrophysicist. I'm not an astro anything. I don't even play for the Houston Astros. And I remember the Jetsons' dog Astro, and I remember his first name was Tralfaz. Rach. So, don't listen to me any more than anyone else, but I wanted to put that out there. But he did say that he did not think that it was a particularly convincing theory that it was part of a destroyed planet, again, because of the shape. The length and the width just don't match anything that's natural. So the chances of it being that thin and that wide and that long in space from a natural occurrence are astronomically small. Pun intended. That was my pun, by the way, not his. Then again, literally, it's an astronomical finding. So it very well could be. And again, that's the conventional accepted theory now. Seems a little easy. I find Dr. Loeb's arguments to be compelling, but again, I don't have any background in the subject, but I have not heard a single person, and I've been looking, I haven't heard a single person, seen a single study, heard a single interview, read a single article where anyone else has pointed out any evidence of any other naturally occurring item in the known solar system or interstellar objects that we can observe. And, we've mapped trillions of stars and I think hundreds of millions of black holes. Obviously, the smaller the object, the harder it is to see it, I suppose, I imagine, I presume. But again, there's been nothing like this before. So to say it's just a part of a destroyed planet, I don't know. Seems like a bit of a cop-out to me and a sort of low-hanging fruit that nobody can disprove it. I mean, recently there's theories that part of a destroyed planet are sitting there in Algeria, I think, in northeastern Africa, and in the Earth's core. Look it up. If you don't believe me, look it up. Google piece of a destroyed planet in the Earth's core and in Africa, and you'll see that this is almost accepted scientific fact that at some point a planet or a destroyed planet or a smaller planet crashed into the Earth. Some people surmise that that the moon is a relic of that, or the moon was formed by part of that collision, and that there's actually pieces of another planet sticking out of Africa, but also in the Earth's core, in our molten core, I imagine through some other layers of the Earth's crust. I just saw Godzilla vs. Kong last night, so that would put a little hole in the hollow Earth theory. But anyway, the point I was trying to get to is look at the shape of those things. They are not rectangles or long discs or like long guitar picks or anything like that at all. They look like you would expect. Chunks, giant big chunks, like mountain chunks. So, not that one thing has to be another, but the relationship seems to, the closest thing we have to actual evidence here on Earth of a destroyed planet chunk doesn't look anything like like your cell phone shape. So, Dr. Loeb does agree with sort of Drake's equation that if you're looking for extraterrestrial life, you should find evidence. You should find structures. You should find pollution. You should find lights. You should find signals. By the way, as an aside, that's part of the issue I have with the more Sitchin theory of things, that were ancient civilizations on Earth with great technology in abundance, because we haven't found any evidence of it. And I know that there's shows and books and photos of things that purport to be ancient technology, and they say we just don't understand it or we're misinterpreting it. I don't think so. I don't rule anything out entirely, but I don't think so. I think if there was technology, we would recognize advanced machines for what they were, as opposed to, pictures of creatures with giant heads and saying, well, that had to be a spacesuit. I think there's plenty of other explanations. that it wasn't actually a spacesuit, including the fact that it might have been intended to be a space helmet, but that was just someone's imagination because they knew they couldn't breathe in water and whatever else the case may be. I certainly subscribe to imagination as being just as likely an explanation. Anyway, back to our story. So we were talking about Drake's equation and that Dr. Loeb accepts that and agrees with it. Drake's equation is basically the foundation for SETI. There's a formula. Do not ask me to explain to you what this formula is, but I'm going to read it. It's capital N equals capital R asterisk dot lowercase f lowercase p dot lowercase n lowercase e dot lowercase f 1 dot lowercase f lowercase I dot lowercase f lowercase c dot lowercase l. Okay, everybody knows what that is. You're following along, of course. This is described in English as a probabilistic argument used to estimate the number of active, communicative extraterrestrial civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy. Okay, that's just a fancy way of saying that's the formula that they use to estimate how and where to find civilizations, and SETI and where they're pointing and where they take their readings from is based largely on Drake's equation. I don't know if they stray from it or not, but they're looking for life signs. They're looking for evidence of structures. They're looking for pollution. They're looking for lights. They're listening for signals. Loeb says that Drake's equation is not useful for finding relics necessarily. Drake's is for finding active signals or signals that were active that maybe took a lot of time to get to us, like radio signals. Now, radio signals move at the speed of light, but if you remember that the closest star from us, I think, is 4.2 or 4.3 light years away, even that would take 4.3 years to get here. And if there's not intelligent life there using radio signals, obviously that's the closest star to us, so all others are further away, some much further away. As far as other things that we might see, I mean, obviously pollution and actual artifacts would need actual visual sight, which it takes longer to break through atmospheres and things like that. And I'm not ignoring the images on Mars where people say that there's pyramids or the face on Mars or whatever. I'm just skipping over it. I mean, I'm not ignoring it in my head, but I'm not talking about it because that is, that's theory. That could be shadows. Who knows? And there's things on Mars. But by things, I mean rovers from 3 different countries driving around right now, and hopefully more will be revealed shortly. So relic seeking is like archaeology, and that requires exploration and observation as options. He's certainly an advocate for what's called astroarchaeology in academia, and that is a real thing. There's something called astroarchaeology. There's also a lot of ocean archaeology. That's a growing field, and I'm looking into finding guests and that to talk about that in the near future. If any of you know anyone, let me know. Astroarchaeology or ocean archaeology or paleoceanography. These are all fields that are out there. They're all real. As far as Dr. Loeb is position-wise on the current Mars research, he believes that microbes are of some limited use. Obviously, they show some life on a primitive level. You can establish bases on places like Mars for archaeological sites, and you can look for non-lunar or non-Terran objects there as well, and that could spur on other exploration. Now, with that further exploration, who's going to pay for it? Governments? Maybe. Private companies? Would they do it just for the archaeology? No. Would they do it possibly for the technology? I doubt it. That's a little bit speculative. Again, I just watched Godzilla vs. Kong last night. We had this guy who was claiming to be very rich, and he was building stuff that obviously cost billions and billions, if not trillions and trillions of dollars, assuming the technology could even be existed. Who's buying any of that stuff? I don't know. Where did the funding come from? Well, what does he sell exactly that made him so rich? Those little things don't get explored in that. More likely, in the real world, it's going to come from exploration for resources, mining. We've covered this story before, where there's an asteroid somewhere out there which is worth something like $60 trillion, more than the entire, or $600 trillion, whatever it was, the asteroid or meteor or whatever it is, with the natural resources and the materials that it was made up of, it was estimated that the value of that object in and of itself was worth more than the entire value of the Earth as us human beings value it today on markets. So the point being is that there's stuff out there that has an objective value that can make people and companies very rich, and that's more likely the incentive. So for those of you saying, well, isn't that what every colonizer did to ruin every continent and every indigenous race, and and sort of what was so scarred our histories? Yeah, it is. Is it also what has fueled wealth and discovery and scientific and technological advancement? Yes. Is it worth the price? I'm not going to answer that for you. Everyone can answer it for yourself. But the purpose of this show and this conversation is just to state that that is the most likely source of the funding, being the private sector, some private public partnerships, and the goal is likely resources. I mean, it always is. So this is not advocacy. This is just reality. Okay. I think we've talked enough about that for the moment, and I do invite you to read Extraterrestrial, but if you don't want to read it, Dr. Loeb has appeared on a number of podcasts. He's done many, many interviews, so listen to him. He'll speak for himself, and you'll judge how good a job I did of translating his views for him, and which stuff is mine, which stuff is his. All right. The next book is Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods. Now, the first thing I noted when I read is this was a lot of speculation, similar to a lot of stuff that I've done here, similar to a lot of stuff that I did here with the Bobbies, Bobby Anthem and Bobby Blaze from the Inhumans, with Shaheen, and other guests as well. But there were certain specifics that merited what I thought were bullet points. And all of this ties into things you've heard before: the Masons, the way certain buildings are aligned with certain star systems. The movie National Treasure was all based about how Washington, D.C. was built with alignments, on the forefront of the mind. The Templars and the Masons sort of being one and the same or related. The pyramids, all of these cultures sort of being very astrologically and astronomically focused. And that was important in some of their sacred places and important buildings. So you've all heard about these things. You've heard about things like sacred geometry, the golden compass, ley lines. We've talked about ley lines here. We've talked about telluric fields. If you look up sacred geometry, you will find no shortage of information. It breaks down to how we decided what a second was, what a minute was, what an hour was, obviously days, weeks, months, how the months got skewed by the Romans by adding 2 more months in it. But even when the months were measured by the moon, there were extra days, and how different cultures dealt with the days. The Aztecs had, I think, 6 dead days, which were basically just festivals. We had leap year is partly based on that. Daylight savings time is partly based on this. So, there are calendars from the Mayans, the Olmecs, the Sumerians, Persians, Chinese, that thousands of years old that, are amazingly accurate. So all of that has to do with sacred geometry and astronomy. So, there's proof on it too, but there's also extrapolation, which is the stuff of fancy, or maybe fact, or maybe in between. Probably a combination of both, but that's the fun stuff. That's the juice. And we're going to certainly explore all of those issues. As long as the show is on the air, we're going to explore wherever the guests take us and wherever my mind takes us and wherever I can find information that takes us. But back to von Daniken and some of the specific bullet points that I took from his book that I thought that were pretty objective and should be laid out. So one is sort of what I was talking about, that stars were drawn for thousands of years in correct positions. And by correct position, they meant the same position in the day as behind the sun. That's how we came to the constellations, where stars would be in the same position in the sky behind the sun at a particular time of day, at day and night. So, because obviously there's a sphere that we can see. The horizon is 360 degrees all the way around. So how do you pick a spot? Well, they picked a spot. They picked where the sun was, and they picked a time of day when the sun was, and they picked a time of day when the stars were there. They created the constellation so that they could track those stars more easily and see the patterns. From there, you develop more constellations. There's far more than 12 constellations, by the way. There's far more than the 12 zodiacs. In fact, in an earlier episode of Garden of Doom, we actually established that there's a 13th constellation that just got ignored for month's purpose. And my constellation, poor Scorpio, is only visible in that spot for, I think it was 6 days or 7 days. Now, I guess poor Scorpio realistically shouldn't be one of the signs, but poor Scorpio overachieved and is a whole constellation, and some other star system got edged out of that, at least on this planet. But anyway, I digress, which is another one of my gifts. Also, in ancient times, there were precisely cut crystal lenses. There were no such tools to do that. The craftsmanship to do that with those tools and with the fragileness of the crystals, it's hard to contemplate how that could have happened and how crystal lenses for things like glasses could have been created, and some artwork. So there's no doubt that there was some type of crystal lenses, because they've been found, and almost like Oumawuma, I just put this together. These are not naturally occurring things. These are artificial, yet they were found from a time before which technology existed to allow the creation of such technology. Another example, next bullet point, is that platinum was smelted and modeled despite platinum only beginning to melt at 1800 degrees Celsius. So who was it that found a way to melt, model, and smelt platinum? Who was creating furnaces at 180 degrees Celsius, 1,800 degrees Celsius. 1,800 degrees Celsius, not 180, 1,800 degrees Celsius. So what fire were they making that was that hot? I'm not even sure the lava is that hot. I didn't look into it, but maybe I should. But I don't think that it is. The next bullet point, the ancient Chinese made aluminum, which must be extracted from bauxite under great chemical technical difficulties. Those chemical technical methods did not exist. The technology to make them exist or to allow them to exist were not in existence at the time. And it's almost impossible to believe that the ancient Chinese would have been able to make aluminum thousands of years ago, except for the fact that they did. Now we have some things that are a little bit speculative, but I think fun and interesting. There are drawings that look a lot like astronaut suits. Now, I did earlier say that I don't rule out imagination. I don't rule out a lot of things. I don't rule out battle helmets. But anyone who's listened to this show knows I don't rule out much of anything. It's noteworthy, though, that these, I'll just call them astronaut suit drawings so that I'm not using different terms, are throughout the world, and that they're really similar. So some of the places, and you can Google astronaut drawings and put in the words, the places. One is in the Pakistani province of Kohistan, Kohistan, in France, in North America, in southern Zimbabwe, in the Sahara, in Peru, in Chile, in the Sahara, look up Tassili, Tassili. You'll find nearly identical drawings to in Tulare, Tulare, California. Obviously nowhere near the Sahara. We had strange helmeted beings depicted in Sayak, Siyak, Iran. There's modern dress in wall drawings, which are called the White Lady of Brandenburg, which is in South Africa. If you take a look at many of the gods of Norway and Sweden, you'll notice many similarities. And also take a look at the artwork found in Val Camonica in Italy. That's VAL, second word, capital C, AMONICA. So all that stuff you'll see that's very similar all around the world with very ancient dates. There's an Old Testament description, so we're going back to Scripture again, by the prophet Ezekiel, where he describes sounds much like a flying vehicle, and the description is with windows and wings and wheels, almost like a Harrier jump jet or hovercraft description, maybe like an Osprey helicopter. In any event, the description of the vehicle was incredible for the time, but sounds a lot like things that we have now, or at least could envision being just a little bit above the horizon. Sort of like I'm picturing like the jets from S.H.I.E.L.D., the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show. I forgot what they called it already. Now, von Daniken seemed to assume that there was some sort of nuclear weapons involved and some sort of nuclear apocalypse, but I'm not really sure how well he understood nuclear weapons. But there are other weapons that could have had the impact and radius described that are non-nuclear that probably didn't exist in the 60s, like what they called the mother of all bombs, the Mohab, the bunker buster, tactical weapons, non-nuclear, gyro radius. But I don't also rule out lower kiloton nuclear attacks as well. Obviously, the nukes we have now are much stronger than the ones used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I imagine building smaller could have been possible, but I don't know. There is some evidence of radiation and some type of nuclear charring, but I'm not convinced that it matches nuclear weapons that we've used since, or had since the 40s forward. But again, I sort of just explored that beforehand. So moving on to the Moses apocalypse in chapter 33, again of the Bible. Eve looked up to heaven and saw a chariot of light drawn by 4 shining eagles. Smoke came up from its wheels. So there again, we have wheels, 4 shining eagles. Well, shining eagles and chariot. Yeah, I mean, shining eagle sounds sort of like a plane, right? Like a jet, a chariot of light. That chariot maybe was just the tail propulsion, jet propulsion. But pretty creative descriptions in the Old Testament. But if you think about them, I mean, think about what when you look up in the sky and you see the Blue Angels perform in Annapolis, or what, at your State's Fair, or football games, or when the Air Force and the Navy and other air services do their formations. Think about when the space shuttle takes off, and you see it leaving the atmosphere. All right. Bullet point 9. Noah's father, Lamech, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, talked to his father, Methuselah. So we have Methuselah showing here, who consulted with Enoch, all about a non-humanly looking child his wife said was his. So we have Lamech talking to Methuselah, who then went to talk to Enoch about Lamech's child, which he said was not his. Now we hear, in the Bible and other stories about people saying, hey, I'm not the father of this child. And maybe we hear about it not in the Bible as well, now I think about it. But that child was Noah. So Lamech, who's supposed to be Noah's father, saying, Noah's not my kid and he doesn't quite look human. Enoch told Methuselah about the flood, and then Enoch took a trip in a fiery chariot. So again, we have a fiery chariot, and Enoch told Methuselah about the flood, who obviously got the information to Noah, or he knew about it, and someone got it to Noah. Noah built the ark, but Noah was maybe Nephilim or some hybrid that Lamech says was not his. But again, we have that fiery chariot. So forget all that other stuff about the story and all that fun stuff. We have a description of another fiery chariot. Now, maybe some of you are saying, yeah, they kept saying fiery chariot, big deal. That's something they thought about. Maybe they saw meteorites out there and they thought it was a fiery chariot. I agree. Maybe that's the case. But the 4 shining eagles? I don't know. Yeah, could that be a meteor storm shower? Sure. But is that 5 and in a formation? Do they look like eagles just because they're smaller circles? I mean, I've seen meteor showers, meteor storms. It's not usually 5. They're not usually in formation, and nothing usually looks like an eagle. Maybe they were just looking for a description. Okay, I accept that as a maybe. But I find the other one more fun. All right, let's move out of the Old Testament for the moment, and let's go into the sagas of Tiahuanaco and the inscriptions on the Gate of the Sun. They discuss a landing of a mothership, landing the, quote, Great Mother, end quote. Those texts also describe experiments until humans came out right. So, the architects and panspermia and the intelligent design, that humans are, but an experiment and they didn't get us right. That sort of fits in with the Sumerian mythology, the origin stories, that the Anunnaki got us wrong several times until they got us even close enough to right. And even then, they weren't exactly pleased. And it was only until some of the gods pleaded to keep us around. And how'd they get rid of us? Well, a flood, of course. Going back to the story of Noah and many other stories as well. So there's a lot of commonalities out there. And we've talked about these on shows time and time again, but hopefully we're growing our audience all the time. So some of you haven't heard all the other shows, and I invite you to check out all of the shows. They're not all about stuff like this, obviously. This show is all over the place. It's the opposite of Seinfeld. Seinfeld called itself a show about nothing, which of course was not true, but this show is a show about everything. Okay, another bullet point. There's a smelting installation in Ezion Geber, which is in Jordan. And I'm sure I pronounced that wrong, but Ezion is Ezion-Geber, Geber. They refined copper 5,000 years ago there. Nobody can figure out how they knew how to refine copper 5,000 years ago and how they built that smelting installation. Now, we're going to move to India. The Indian Mahabharata tells of the Vimanas, Vimanas. I should probably spell Mahabharata, Mahabharata. And the Vimanas were flying machines propelled by mercury and propulsive winds. And these stories are at least 5,000 years old. Now, how did they know something was propelled by mercury, which was called quicksilver back then, at least in Europe, and propulsive wind? What does propulsive wind sound like? Well, the expulsion from a jet, maybe? Something that we've heard about before. Okay. Most of the vehicles described had tremendous dins or thunder, like massive engines, like turbines. We have those today. So all that makes sense today. All of these descriptions make perfect sense today. Maybe not Mercury, but all the rest. They don't make sense, though, thousands of years ago. All right. Here's a word that I'm definitely going to butcher, not purposefully, but the Samsaptaka Bada, which is Sanskrit, also from India. So I am going to spell that. Bear with me. Samsaptakal, Kabadha. And that's again in Sanskrit. And it distinguished between both flying and non-flying vehicles. So cars, trucks, something that didn't fly. And the flying vehicles. So that's pretty interesting as well, that those peoples or the visitors or the Anunnaki or the Veda, whatever we call them, because in Indian history, traditions, folklore, mythology, theology, whatever word you're more comfortable thinking of, does have descriptions of gods. Now, their gods were blue, and that is different than the descriptions of the Anunnaki. And I also believe it's different than the descriptions of the Veda. So there was a distinction between the gods of the Hindu panoply and these other peoples or visitors. I am going a little bit off right now to say that there's also stories about ancient Atlantis, that it went to war with a culture in Asia and lost, which is sort of hard to believe if Atlantis was this, apex of technology at the time. Well, we've talked about on the show before, why did there only have to be one? It seems like the Atlantis legend itself implies there was at least another rival culture out there with technology or powers that not only rivaled Atlantis enough to convince Atlantis that they could go to war with it successfully, but they lost. So, again, the Veda and the Anunnaki may not be the same. The gods may not have been the same as the demons. In Norse mythology, we had the Aesir, which were the Asgardians. But if you remember, Freya, Odin's wife, was from, I think, the Yasir, which were a rival to the Asgardians, and that sort of forged the peace. But they were, sort of the equals of the Asgardians. But you also had the fire giants and you had the ice giants. So you did have different races that were rivals and, were threats. So it's sort of the same thing. Not that much different if you think about it between the angels that sided with God and the angels that went up against God. So, again, two or more powerful peoples, beings out there. So again, you have sort of the same story, just in different places. And some of the descriptions are very similar. Not all, but the story is the same. And again, like any game of operator, things change over time, especially millennia. All right. So in the Yudhisthira, which is spelled Yudhisthira, these are people, like this describes people like Enoch and Elijah, who left Earth in a heavenly chariot. So we already talked about Enoch earlier. So sort of an early wise man that people like Methuselah, the oldest man known, and Lamech consulted with. And then Elijah, known as Elijah the prophet, both left Earth in a heavenly chariot. Not that different than the story of Muhammad, who also left Earth, I think on a flying horse, over a rainbow. Is that much different than a heavenly chariot, a flying horse? Not really. I mean, most chariots are pulled by horses, right? All right. Back to things that are here on Earth that can't be disputed, away from Jeff's little stories or stories that Jeff is repeating that other people have made Jeff's mind turn into a whirling dervish. So there is a welded iron column in Delhi. It's there right now. It has no rust. It has no weathering whatsoever. It's over 4,000 years old. It's iron. Nobody knows how there's no rust or weathering. I mean, everyone knows the rust is basically iron oxide, red, brownish, sharp. It hurts. It can give you tetanus or other diseases. And it's hard to avoid. That's why we have Infrastructure Week all the time. All right. Some less exciting stuff. There's 1,000-year-old jade jewelry. Jade's from China. Nothing special about this, except that it's found in Guatemala. So unless you believe that the Chinese and the Central Americans were having active trade 1,000 years ago, that seems unlikely. So jade somehow jumped continents. Yes, it could have been traders, I suppose, but who was trading? Who was trading back then between Asia and North America 1,000 years ago? I don't know about anyone. I don't know about anyone in objective history, but yet the jade is here. So that is some interesting stuff. I hope you found it interesting. I hope I told these stories in a way that was interesting and made a little bit of sense to you with our book reports. So let me tell you what's coming. I alluded to it earlier in the show. we're going to go back to our format of guests. I am currently talking to two people that are part of the NACON conference, and hopefully we will have set those dates shortly, and maybe 1 or 2 bonus shows will drop this week. Next week, we're going to do episodes 7 through 12 at least on Land of the Lost with our fun panel. And in 2 weeks, we have our friend Bobby Blades coming back, and we're going to remember how we left off with the Church of Satan and realize that Satan really wasn't part of the Church of Satan. Or when I thought of Satanists, I thought of something completely different than what the Church of Satan is. And we learned that the Church of Satan really isn't the same as Luciferians. So we're going to talk about Luciferians. So if you haven't heard that show, I definitely recommend you check out the Church of Satan Without Satan episode between now and then, or before you listen to the show that's going to drop on or about the 18th. And I've got a show coming up with Chris Silence of the Ams, who has been with us on the Indigenous show. And he also was on another show as well a few weeks ago. He's a great speaker. He has his own podcast on the Rational Rage Network, which Garden of Doom is to be proud to be a part of, which he calls the Far Center. And it's a very interesting podcast. You should listen to it. It's like his essays, and he's a great speaker, and he's a well-organized talker and thinker. He also does wrestling podcasts. So I'm not the only wrestling podcaster that jumps into the deep water sometimes. But he's going to be on, and as you may recall from some of the prior episodes, he was an ordained minister. He did his Mormon mission, and he was on the apocryphal Gospels show. Did a great job there, and he's going to break down for us a lot of the differences in the different sects of Christianity. So, to me, that's very interesting. Hopefully it is to you. Maybe you are a Christian and you already know all of this stuff. Maybe you're a Christian and you're wondering, what's the difference between Catholic and Methodist? What's the difference between Lutheran and Protestant? What's Presbyterian mean? I wonder. I think I knew some of these things at one point, but I forgot. So hopefully Chris will be able to educate us all, and hopefully you'll find that educational and informative and entertaining, but definitely at least 2 out of 3. So those are a couple of the shows that are coming up beyond the Land of the Lost and the continuing NACON speakers, who I believe we're going to have, continuing through April 24th. And I've got guests booked into May, working on some stuff with people who are going to talk to us about folklore from around the world. So we're going to continue to do fun and educational stuff, and hopefully less solo shows from me. So keep on listening. Thank you for bearing with me for this solo show. I hope you find it interesting, and maybe it sparked your own imagination, do your own research, and maybe one day you'll be doing your own podcast and you'll teach me some stuff. All right. Thanks a lot for listening to Garden of Doom, and we'll check you out later this week. Peace out, everyone.
Si tu veux de moi, t'accompagner au bout des jours, laisse-moi venir près de toi, sur le grand chariot de bois et de toile. Nous nous en irons du côté d'où montera le jour, dans les premiers reflets du ciel, avant la chaleur du soleil, sous la dernière étoile. La plaine n'aura plus de frontières. La terre sera notre domaine. Que j'aime ce vieux chariot qui tangue. Si tu veux de moi, dormir à ton côté toujours. L'été sous la lune d'argent, l'hiver dans la neige et demande pour amour, le long des torrents et des bois.